Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're gonna colonize Stinkola. That's definitely one sentence I never thought I would say. And the reason why is I think it holds the tree. We can see the artifact back here and the vague resemblance of a room. I'm thinking this might be the tree. So to start off with, we have the dazzling Prototype 6 in orbit and ready. We're gonna deploy the old Rover's module and see what the old rover can find. Speaking of rover, Rover the First is perished. He's shut down on the planetoid of Frigido. But because we dug all that ice out, it allowed this water to warm up a little bit, and well, now we get a permanent flooding message. And the flooding message says the temporal tear is flooded. Well, folks, we finally found the temporal tear. Now, this isn't cheating because I didn't do this. The game did this. How am I supposed to know by a flooded message is going to tell you exactly where the temporal tear opener is? At least we now have it figured out where the temporal tear opener is, and we can actually get on to the rest of the game until we're ready to open up the temporal tear. I also wanted to point out how small Stinkola is. In fact, if we just forget about Rover for a second and let's do our little dig tool here. 61, maybe 62 tiles wide. Same thing for Frigido, but definitely not the same for Siltora here. Comes in at a whopping 94 tiles wide. And this is a weird planetoid to find because apparently meteorites still hit here and drop off tons of regolith. In fact, this one tile itself has over 10 tons of regolith. If we ever need some filtration medium, we know where to find it. I think we're going to land Rover here. The reason being is this looks like a fairly standard and easy dig for Rover to do to get into this little cavern. Then we can get our grubby little hands on the office mug. Here comes Rover now. Oh, perfect landing, buddy. Perfect. First things to do. Oh, doesn't that figure? Another bioscan door. Well, we can at least get this all dug out and ready. And once we get a little bit of material, there is something in here. Sedimentary rock. We can build a door out of sedimentary rock, right? Oh no. Rover stranded himself. Will you look at this? There's two office mugs. One for me and one for my pal Rover. Rover's being a pal, putting in a manual airlock made out of sedimentary rock. And that way we don't lose all the beautiful environment here. The great thing about Rover is it really shows you what everything looks like on the planetoid before you land your duplicates. For instance, I initially was going to land the rocket here without knowing, but being all this polluted water sitting here, I don't think that'd be a great idea. The last thing that we want is a rocket to come in down here, superheat some polluted water a couple times, and then all of a sudden Stinkola is just Steamola. Which makes me think about this area here. It's actually separated by a vacuum space, which is good, so it'll allow all the extra stuff that comes out of the rocket to kind of dissipate. Unfortunately, this puff will not last very long. Maybe we can get that puff to come on over in here and start doing his job. There's also a ton of balm lilies we're looking at. There's some pincha peppa plants. We found two geysers. Interested to find out what those are. According to the star map, we have access to a chlorine gas vent, a tungsten volcano, and a carbon dioxide vent, all of which are not very helpful. If we had some options for some better vents, I think we'd actually take our chances and do some different type of farming to go ahead and feed that tree. But as it is, with these limited options though, I think we're just going to stick to the Pacu farming. The next step is going to be sending this rocket over there to start doing some colonization work. So it's about time we give you the grand tour of the interior of this bad boy. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Old Jupiter. Old Jupiter is racked and stacked with 4 solar panel modules for all of your initial planetary power needs, a Trailblazer module to stick a dupe in, and an orbital cargo module that has 400 kilos of steel, and that way we can build a rocket platform once we get there. 1 large solid oxidizer tank and 2 large liquid fuel tanks to power our beautiful petroleum engine. Inside the Old Jupiter, we have some standard features. Now, one thing you'll notice is that there's no mess table. Well, there is, but we have to put in the food. So we put the refrigerator in, we drop off all the berry sludge, then we uncheck it to where the berry sludge sits here, and then we'll put the mess table back. Yes, unfortunately, only 1 duplicate gets to sit at a mess table. The other 3, well, I just couldn't make it fit. Now, the filtration system is a little different this time. And the reason is simple. We have to keep the Atmo suits fully loaded. So whenever these things have power, and there's actually available room, this pump and this filter will always be running. It takes the oxygen, splits half of it into the Atmo suits, and half of it into the gas vent back out into the atmosphere. And all the carbon dioxide gets filtered out and ejected out into space. Now, 4 duplicants are going to be able to live on this rocket while we're colonizing a planet, so it was important that we had high morale and some room bonuses. And that's the reason why we made sure to be able to fit at least one mess table. So we're getting the Great Hull bonus for morale +6, plus we're getting a barracks bonus for a morale +1. The decor is pretty good on top of that. The berry sludge is a good +3 food, which is actually the same level as barbecue. And if we just click on a random dupe here, they have a morale bonus of a +4 for eating a standard meal. I'm guessing they had a frost bun. But you can see here, the Hulk had the good meal, probably either the berry sludge or some barbecue, and got the +8 to morale, which is that quality 3 that we were just talking about. So why do we care about that? Well, this is 8 morale. We know we're going to get +6 for this Great Hall. That gives us a total of 14, plus one more is 15. So at a minimum, we can expect 15 morale on a daily cycle. None of our duplicants have a morale requirement of above 15. That means no one's going to be losing their mind when they're living out of the rocket. And that minimum of 15 is not even including any decor bonuses that they get. For instance, Ant-Man here is getting 6 morale from being around nice decor. They're also getting 2 more morale for a 3-shift break. So we're probably actually sitting somewhere around a 20 to 25 morale. But now the question remains, who do we send? Well, looking at Stinkhole and everything we know we're going to need a digger, because you just need diggers. We'll probably need a researcher to do any sort of analyzing. We'll need a mechatronics engineer, because we're going to have to build shipping rails and the such. And then we're going to need a pilot. I'm sitting here looking at Supergirl, and she loves piloting, so she gets the morale bonuses there, but she also loves mechatronics engineering. Let's see how high this morale requirement gets if we make her both. 19 morale. That's going to be a little sticky, but why not? In fact, I'll bet you we can make it even a little bit better by removing data analysis and rocket piloting too, because they are going to need field research. If we click on field research, that's up to 21, and that's just a little too high. Well, Supergirl also likes tidying. Oh, and plumbing. All right, Supergirl, into the skill scrubber you go. Of all the things our duplicants go through, this is probably the one I feel the worst for. We're literally shaking the duplicant so hard, it forgets everything it knows. It's like they're getting lobotomized. Has this ever happened to you? Supergirl was fresh out of the skill scrubber, and I accidentally clicked on one of the skills we don't need her to have, which means she has to actually go back into the skill scrubber. This time I really do feel bad. This is 2 skill scrubs in the matter of a cycle. That can't be good. While Supergirl's getting scrubbed, it's time for us to load up with some other things. So we're going to actually uncheck the oxalite and give us plenty of other materials. Now, it's unfortunate that you can't do this with the orbital cargo module, but in order to load up multiple things, it's just sort of lucky. For instance, if I selected steel and plastic, dupes would start dropping off steel and plastic until we got to our max, but there'd be no rhyme or reason. Now, I suppose you could do the whole sweep only and mark some plastic as swept, but that is a lot of micromanagement. So I think the easier way is just to throw it all into a storage bin here, unselect the storage bin, and keep loading it up that way. To start off with, I think we're going to go get some steel. 20 tons ought to do. Then we're definitely going to grab some glass so that we can put some solar panels on the planet. A quick tip, if you have your rocket control station set on grounded, make sure you go to your storage bin and click uncontrolled. This way, duplicants can still use it, even though it's still sitting on Brino. While the dupes are busy doing that, I wanted to give you an update on a couple of things around the colony. First, with the bees. I had seen a comment that said, hey, remember to click Enable Auto Harvest. And I gotta be honest, I wouldn't recommend enabling Auto Harvest. And the reason is pretty simple. We have a lot of beta hives, and anytime they would get any amount of enriched uranium, some dupe would come by with their ice cream scooper and scoop it out, which is, I guess, what you're intended for it to do. And in our case, we have a few storage bins here that we put all of our enriched uranium in. But I think it's a whole lot more efficient to wait until you're ready to harvest whatever enriched uranium is in there, then click in the enabled auto harvest, wait for the duplicant to come get whatever uranium's in there, and then uncheck it. Now, you could also play with the priorities and say, hey, we only want to enable auto harvest on a level of 3. But between all of the other side projects we've been doing around the colony, I just didn't have the amount of dupe labor to really be able to do that. For instance, because we upgraded our heavy watt wire to heavy watt conductive wire, we're also having to go around and upgrade the heavy watt conductive joint plates. Now, I personally have never seen a joint plate overload. I'm not sure if it's even possible. If you click on the joint plate, it doesn't give you any sort of dimensions for what it can hold, unlike the wires that actually say specifically the maximum amount of power is 50 kilowatts. The joint plate doesn't say it. Now, if you go to the power menu, again, the heavy watt joint plate says nothing of the likes. Go over to the heavy watt conductive joint plate, still doesn't say anything, other than this one small blurb that says carries more wattage than a regular heavy watt joint plate without overloading. So there's not a lot of evidence, but that one sentence was enough to make me realize, oh yeah, I've got to replace all the joint plates as well. And it is a painstaking process. Because I don't want to destroy the entire power grid, I walk up to every heavy watt joint plate, click destruct, wait for the duplicant to come remove it, and quickly replace it with a heavy watt conductive joint plate. It's for this reason I've decided that in future playthroughs, instead of utilizing the space-saving method of using the heavy watt plate as a floor for the large power transformer, I'm actually just going to put the wire over one and line everything up like this. And that way, whenever I need to tie into a transformer, I can literally just tie into it that way. And that way I don't have to go around upgrading 100 different conductive joint plates. Alright, Supergirl is freshly skill scrubbed again, and I'm going to be very careful not to click something unless we really want it. Now, we definitely want the rocket piloting, but I don't think we actually need rocket piloting too. Yeah, it makes them a little bit faster, but yeah, who cares? Then we can go into advanced research and field research just in case we need that geographical analysis. And then we can load up on what it takes for the mechatronics engineering. And now we only have a morale requirement of 13. I like this a lot better. Alright, we got some copper, some glass, some steel, and all of our other oxalite sitting on the ground. I think the last thing we're going to say is we want more oxalite. Because we're relying on oxalite for our oxygen production, and it's going to be feeding all of these suits as well, we want to make sure that we have plenty of it. Now right now this system is only running during the daytime because the only power source it has is the solar panels. But once it's in flight, it also gets its power from the engines, which should be plenty of time to be able to fill up the rest of the Atmo suits. Almost forgot, we definitely going to need some reed fibers. Without the reed fibers, those Atmo suits would get worn out. We definitely don't want 20 tons, but to say the truth, I don't know how much reed fiber weighs, so let's just say 100 kilos and see how much it brings us. Now, because we have pretty good reed fiber production, we're sitting on 440 units. Some other laughable numbers is we actually turned off the molecular forge because we're sitting at 107 tons of supercoolant. And we actually needed the dupe labor more than we needed 108 tons of supercoolant. We also turned off plastic production because we have 150 tons of it. But the one thing I gotta say that we don't have enough of is definitely the oxalite. Based off of everything we've just dumped into that rocket and keeping the rockets flying in space, we're down to about 100 kilos. I think what I'm eventually going to have to do is set up a separate oxygen center just to feed the oxalite refineries. So apparently reed fiber weighs 1 kilo. Well, we now have 100 reed fibers, which is plenty. And I think that's about it. So now's the time to actually select the crew. We know we're taking Supergirl. I think we'll go ahead and take Hulk, Star-Lord. Yeah, and why not? Let's bring Happy along for the ride. But we also have to remember we have this overcomplicated door system to make sure that dupes going on rockets don't come through this door. So we need to make sure we remove their access. Now we just need to make sure they have access to get through this door. I almost forgot. We need to make sure that we actually build the Atmosuit checkpoint. Now, it used to be that you could not build your checkpoints here. Apparently, Clay has fixed this in a recent patch. Fingers crossed that this doesn't mess up the whole design of my rocket. And of course, the first time they came in here, Star-Lord brought a suit that was, worn out. So now we have to get everybody off so to make sure that they have new suits. Our band of idiots is ready, and I think we're ready for launch. Good luck to our faithful team. Almost got me again. Gotta make sure they're allowed to eat the berry sludge. Speaking of which, we have 400,000 calories. That gives us about 50 cycles to be able to do our work before we need to get ready to come home. Because remember, these are hungry boys, and they're going to be consuming 2,000 calories per cycle. And if you're wondering why we're going through the painstaking process of colonizing that planet, it's because of that tree. Remember, the tree is going to be able to give us iso resin. From what I read, a little bit better than what it used to, based on some changes Clay made. We combine that with some abyssalite and reed fiber, and then we can get some insulation. And insulation is one of those late game resources that is just so handy to deal with. For instance, I wanted to turn this entire power brick into an ice block. Well, in order to do that, I still have to be able to bring the petroleum in to the petroleum generators without freezing. Because ideally, this entire room is going to be minus 200, and unfortunately the petroleum wouldn't actually make it in. For that matter, neither would the natural gas. So there's a lot of these sort of little problems that we have to deal with, but insulation fixes them all. And why is that? That's because it has a thermal conductivity of 0. That's right, it doesn't exchange temperature. It's beautiful. While our dupes are making their way over to Stinkola, I wanted to provide an update on the Radbolt generator. You might remember the recent patch made some changes to the radiation systems. Specifically, one of the updates was this automation input now enables or disables the building. Well, remember, in our old system, we were treating it as, okay, enable means it fires, disable means it doesn't fire, which ultimately kept the Radbolt generator disabled, which means it lost all of its Radbolts. So now we're running it directly. As soon as the Radbolt generator has enough bolts, it sends it right to the materials study terminal, where we are finishing up the very last of our research. So what do you do now? Well, what they want you to do is put in a Radbolt chamber. Now the Radbolt chamber sort of has that functionality that we were treating the Radbolt generator with. It stores Radbolts, and whenever you want it to send some Radbolts, you send it a green signal. Luckily, this system works fine for us because it takes us long enough to generate those Radbolts that Dr. Banner is long gone from using all the Radbolts in the material study terminal. But also, because we completed all of our data analysis research, and we still have over 200 databanks that now we have nothing to do with, which means we can actually retire the Interstellar Skylab 14. And I know this is a little bit of a sad moment for a lot of you. This was our first rocket on this colony. So for that reason, we're going to leave it around for a little while. Let's let it sit there as a memorial of how far we've come. Alright, our away team has arrived into orbit at Stinkola, so we have a couple of things we need to do. First, let's deploy the orbital cargo module. Sends the awesome little cargo down, looks like the same modules that are used in the interplanetary launchers. And now we need to send a dupe, and I think it'd be fitting to send Star-Lord. He's always been the backbone of our colony, really. Now for temporaries, I think we'll put him down here. But first, we need to make sure that he's in his suit, because that would have been bad. Now this is going to be a little tricky. We got to undock the suit, assign it to Star-Lord, have him put it on, and not hang it up. Beautiful. Do not move, Star-Lord. Don't move. Now we have the game paused, just in case. We'll land this module right next to rovers. Oh, here they come now. Beautiful. Ignore the graphical glitch. You can see that he is wearing his suit. You just can't see the top of it. Now, we don't have very long before Star-Lord starts to have a bad day. And if you notice, these are the sort of modules that you have to use the payload opener in order to open. So we could do that, or we could actually just deconstruct Rover's lander. And we can also disassemble the Trailblazer lander as well. Now, I believe we decided on this area would be better for our rockets. Even though this one already has the door, I suppose it's not too bad if we put the rocket right over to this side, and then we could insulate and shield it in later for when we take off. With both of those landers completed, we now have the 800 kilos required for the rocket platform. We'll put it right over here. And now all we have to do is select the rocket platform and tell old Jupiter to land right here. Rover, you might not want to stand there, buddy. While Star-Lord's just standing around, we can start building the ladder segments. That way they can get in and out of the interior of the rocket. Now you'll notice, look how quickly all this is heating up. This is exactly what we didn't want. So before we take off again, we're going to need to make sure we cool this place down. Yeah, all of this, there's polluted water that turned into steam and then back into water. And with these last few pieces, Star-Lord will be able to get back inside the rocket. Now remember, when you first start landing a rocket, as soon as you decide to deploy a duplicate out of the rocket, it changes its crew manifest. So you have to reselect Star-Lord in this case to make sure that he can get back inside old Jupiter. And look at this. The family's all happy and rejoined together, and all is well. Now, we still have some challenges because we don't have enough power right now to keep all these atmosuits going. And we don't want to end up with a situation where we have a duplicate in trouble. So we're going to wait until one of the duplicates goes to sleep and eats, and then we'll bring that one duplicate out to make sure we're building everything we need to get started. I don't know why this gets me every single time. Rover just shut down. It kind of makes me feel better that he got to meet his buddy Star-Lord, but they really just need to have a way to recharge Rover. Come on, Clay. I don't have the emotional maturity to deal with this type of loss. So I was taking a look at the duplicates' morales, and Star-Lord sitting at 35, and I'm like, wow, how did he get that? He's starry-eyed. So because he's been to space, he's getting a +10 to morale. I thought this was awesome. Just by happenstance, Supergirl's the one who got the table. It makes me wonder if she beat them all up to make sure she'd have the table, or if they were actually just being gentlemen. And with that, the dupes are hard at work. We're going to start off with the 3 solar panel system to power this colony. Oh, and there she is, the mighty Experiment 52B. Now, we have a lot of work to do in here, but right now, we're just not going to go near it. I think step 1 is we're going to do a lot of digging. To start off with, we're going to be feeding our fish algae. Well, to be precise, we're going to be feeding one fish algae. That fish stays nice and healthy. The rest, well, they will have their short life and then they will go join the tree. But we need all of this algae to be able to do it. Otherwise, our sort of infinite Pacu system's not really going to work well. What I've noticed is there's not a lot of raw minerals. Right now, the only one we have is sedimentary rock. So we're going to need to dig down in here and grab some of this granite too. This isn't going to end well. Star-Lord was digging this out and Supergirl was standing on it. Well, when instead of falling, she teleported up here to be with the tree. The tree's not going to like that very much. We need to build this ladder immediately. Being that the orbital cargo module seemed to be kind of worthless, we're replacing it with this beautiful battery module. And that way we can store up power for both charging our suits and for making sure that we have enough power during the nighttime. But because all of these resources are so very valuable, we're now going through the process of actually deconstructing them as we walk our ways down. Elsewhere on the planetoid, we do have 3 solar panels installed. We have 1 cargo ammo thingy stuck in the middle of space. And we're working on sort of enclosing the tree in, and that way we can make sure it has its own atmosphere. We're also going through the process of digging everything up and making sure everything's tidy. I'm trying to figure out a good way to actually dig down in here and get access to all this granite and igneous rock and more algae without dumping all of this polluted water. I think the solution is to dig through here and then build our ways down. So we'll start with a dig command, something like this. And since we are trying to conserve materials around here, we are only going to put ladders every other tile. And don't do like I did. I'm actually going to move this solar panel over by 1. You see how we're not getting the nice 3/4 amount of wattage? And it's because we're actually have more tiles being covered up by the solar panel than necessary. So one item that I was a bit short-sighted on is I should have ran a lot more of the liquid pipes. Because we have 4 duplicates all using the wall toilet, this is not actually going to be enough water. We've only been here on Stinkola for a few cycles and we're already eating into about half of our reserves. Lucky for us, there's plenty of water here, but it's still something we're going to have to take care of that we wish we wouldn't have had to. I made a small modification to our filtration system that prioritizes the oxygen going to our atmosuits before the excess gets vented off into the environment. Now, because I just got the battery installed, there's a little bit of a backlog of carbon dioxide in the system, but once it eats through it, these atmosuits will be able to fill up much quicker. How awesome is it that the ladder beds have little hooks that you can hang your hat on? So we've managed to dig down the right side of the planetoid, and this one is definitely a small one. The magma layer is right here. Not a big deal, but we're going to have to get creative on finding a filtration medium. There's no sand sitting on here, which means we're actually going to have to bring out the rock crusher in order to make some sand. Now, with the rock crusher, it'll take, say, gold amalgam, and it'll give you gold at 50% of the refinement. The other 50% will be in sand. And we're going to need that sand because we need to filter water using a water sieve so we can turn some of this polluted water into clean water. And we need to do that relatively quickly because we are running out of water. We also decided to do something a little unorthodox. We removed the mini gas pump and put a full-fledged gas pump in here. Unfortunately, this means the dupes are not going to be washing their hands as they leave the wall toilet. But the gas pump moving 500 grams per second is just doing a lot better than the mini gas pump could do at 50 grams per second. And we need to get these Atmo suits filled, that way we can get to the work of cleaning water as soon as possible. Oh, we're definitely cutting this one close. We have just over 20 kilos of water remaining. And I know what you're thinking, like, it's not that big of a deal, right? The dupes will just soil themselves for a little while. Well, remember, this is max difficulty, and max difficulty doesn't play when dupes get stressed for having soggy feet. There's just so many little things you have to do in order to get just a simple refinement, and when you're working it with 1 to 2 dupes at a time, it just takes a long time. Fear not, Star-Lord is on the job. Okay, when it rains, it pours. Apparently, this is too much water for the water sieve to be sitting in and not be flooded. Alright guys, we're gonna have to go into the if it's yellow, let it mellow rules. We really don't have enough water to be doing extra flushes, okay? Supergirl is grinding up the gold amalgam and giving us a little bit of sand right now. And then we just have a few more things to install and then we should be good. Alright, just in time. The toilet water crisis of the old Jupiter has been fixed. And the duplicants rejoice. Alright guys, you can go back to standard flushing rules. It goes to show you just how much work there is to get even just started on a planetoid. For instance, we needed a little bit of power. We needed a way to make some materials that aren't naturally on this planetoid, in this case, sand. We needed to be able to fix our exosuits and store the power. We even got some water filtration going. All of that, and we haven't even started the work of feeding the tree. We did get a nice dig shaft started though, so I'm kind of happy with the progress that we've made. In the next episode, we're definitely going to be tackling feeding the tree. I expected to be able to get so much more accomplished during this episode, but even the process of getting the rocket here and getting this basic start has taken a bunch of cycles. And once we really get rocking and rolling, as far as getting all the Atmo suits filled, things are going to go a lot quicker. And things are heading in that direction. I don't know how I feel about the duplicates not being able to wash their hands. This is only going to get very bad. We revealed a pair of tungsten volcanoes in the middle of the magma biome. They're producing tungsten at 3,726 degrees. I think in the late game, that'd be real fun to come and tame. Well, we have a lot of work to do on Stinkola. I hope you've enjoyed the beginning of our colonization of this planet. I had a good time. I hope you did too. And I'll talk to you soon.